example, when I first started my apprenticeship, all 5 of us used to grab our chairs at Smoko. The freshest apprentice would get all the chairs out. We'd all sit in a circle. We'd all talk shit for half an hour. And then we'd get up and we'd go back to work and we'd do the same thing, come back and so on. That has disappeared.
What is success to you?
I think it was a learn to love it experience.
And there's always pitfalls that you can fall in, but then you've got no one else to blame but yourself.
Number one thing if you're struggling is to catch up with people about it.
Hey guys, Better Builder Apprentice is brought to you by our friends at Builders Academy. Builders Academy is New Zealand's newest apprentice provider, and they definitely here to shake things up. Why use Builders Academy? Well, first of all, they're just as good as the other guys, but on top of that, they will come on site every 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, that's quite a lot, right? That means that your apprentices will be a lot more engaged and they'll have to learn a lot less modules in between trainer visits. Secondly, they are backed by master builders. And thirdly, they have an experienced and motivated team that knows the industry inside and out. In fact, most of them are ex-chippies. Now, Builders Academy are currently offering $0 fees if you sign your apprentice up before the 31st of August. So definitely worth taking advantage of this deal. Just go to buildersacademy.co.nz. Okay, that's it from me. Enjoy the episode. Dane Simpson, thanks for coming on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you are a, Sarah asked me to say this properly, an on-site workplace educator.
Yeah.
Is that the right way around?
Yeah, workplace apprenticeship educator.
Workplace apprenticeship educator.
Yeah, something to that extent at least.
For Builders Academy, obviously. And the on-site part's really important, right? Because we'll talk a bit more about that, but you guys really pride yourself in coming on site very regularly.
Yep.
Because that's every 6 weeks. Yep. Yeah, that's awesome, eh? And then there's obviously a lot of benefits to that we'll kind of get into as well. But I want to find out a little bit about where you grew up. You obviously didn't grow up in New Zealand.
No, so I spent the first 15 and a bit years in South Africa. And then as most South Africans do with the issues that South Africa have, we moved out, came straight over to New Zealand, moved through to Rotorua, and stayed there till, 2008, 2009? Basically about a year after the global financial crisis.
Right.
So I started my apprenticeship just before the GFC. And then, Rotorua being a tourist town died. Had to go somewhere else to find building work.
What was it like moving to Rotorua? Just starts a little bit of a smelly town to move to if you're not used to it?
Takes a little bit of getting used to. It does. To be honest, now I don't even notice it.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of, I've got my wife and my son in the car and we drive through to see our parents because her parents are there as well. And my son will ask me, what's that smell? And then you'll kind of, you'll realize what it is. But it doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't take long to actually get used to it.
Yeah, and what is it? It's like sulfur or
something.
something.
It is sulfur, yeah.
Yeah, and it's volcanic, because it's a volcanic area for the overseas listeners.
Yeah.
Rotorua has like a bit of an egg smell to it.
That's it. Yeah, in certain areas. So it plays a big part into construction when it comes to material selection and things like that.
Really? Because
why
does it seep into the products or something?
Yeah, so the sulfur actually eats away at galvanized coatings and things like that. So depending on how close you are to any volcanic activity, you have to select certain materials.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, that's very interesting. So you got to really know that when you're building in
that's
that.
That's it,
Yeah. Okay, so that will become part of the, apprentice learning, I guess,
throughout.
Throughout.
Journey, yeah.
So you're from South Africa.
Yes.
Most Kiwis listening to this will probably agree that we don't have enough South Africans here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The North Shore, everyone in the North Shore needs to spread out a bit more.
Yeah. So we won't talk about, rugby too much or Springbok All Blacks, from a few weeks back. But what we'll do is we'll stick to building.
Cool.
And for this conversation, otherwise, we'll offend some people. So you started, you got into your apprenticeship there. And then what was that like after around the GFC? I assume work was there wasn't a lot of jobs going around?
Work died out largely residential-wise in Rotorua. So we moved I moved to Hamilton and then started working for Fulton Hogan.
Yep.
Was with them for probably a year and a bit, I want to say. building some bridges out Tarapa way. And then, kind of got back into my apprenticeship.
Yeah, and then that was like, that would have
basically,
been like, 15 odd years ago or more, a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so what was it like back then going through your apprenticeship? So how long did it take you to get through it?
So in all honesty, it probably took me about 6 years. I think through a conversation I had with my assessor, because he was there when I joined the other company as a training advisor, I think it took me about 4.5 years in time, but it was about 6 years of actual working to get through my apprenticeship. Largely it was the global financial crisis that played a part in that, just trying to find work. But yeah, I think, it's about 4.5 years total.
Yeah, and then you
being
obviously got qualified, and then did you then work for someone else for the remainder until you transitioned?
Yeah. So my dad is a cabinet maker joiner and a carpenter. And he has had a few businesses, or he's had, a cabinet maker business in South Africa, and then he's been a builder here in New Zealand, had his own company. And I've always seen how hard he has had to work for it. And not that I'm afraid of hard work, but I'm very aware of a work-life balance. Largely in my childhood, my dad's worked 7 days a week, and I didn't want to give the same lifestyle to my son. I kind of saw an opportunity to gain some experience in the trade, and then before my body becomes too brittle and all those kinds of things, I could take my trade background and experience that I had and put it to good use.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think it's important, and even through running this podcast, we've kind of figured out, and just kind of realized myself as well, it's cool to know that there's different avenues from people doing their apprenticeship, becoming a builder, and the more options there are, the better it is, So we've had people on here that's transitioned into project management.
That's it.
People that have transitioned, like you being an educator for other apprentices coming through. We've had a few other ones that sort of slipped my mind now, but a few other avenues where people have gone into, or even sometimes they've gone into more of the specializing in maybe the specialized construction, concrete construction,
large commercial, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, so it's kind of there's different. You don't have to get qualified, work a couple of years, and then start your own company necessarily. Now, it's great if you want to get into that as well, and that's why this podcast exists as well. But it's good to know that there's more than one option, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that we push quite heavily, is that getting your qualification is the start, right? It's certainly not the end of your journey. Once you have your qualification, you then have enough responsibility to make good and bad decisions, and then you can go from there and learn. Fortunately for me, I started to find out that I enjoyed watching and training apprentices, just seeing their development over time. Going into BCITO was a good option.
And then, so how long? So then you got into that. What was that like? Sort of starting, being working on the tools. I assume working on site, being a builder outside, and then all of a sudden, they give you a little polo neck, not a polo neck, polo shirt.
Polo shirt.
And they go, okay, cool. You're now educator. And then, what was that like? Kind of transitioning into that.
It's a challenge. It's a massive challenge. So you kind of get used to your body being physically tired at the end of the day. Once you were finished at the start, your brain's tired, but your body's not. So you want to keep on going.
Yeah.
I remember one of the people told me, I am not a builder anymore. I am a education expert with a technical skills background.
Yeah.
It's certainly, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. A big factor is over-assessing. That's one of the hardest things, to be honest. You have to really get a firm grasp of what the qualification is asking for, because everyone builds to a different standard. Everyone has different methods. There's different qualities. And just because I think that my quality is extremely high, for example, doesn't mean that that's the quality that an apprentice should achieve at the end of their qualification.
Right.
So, it's
Yeah,
I think it's easier having a carpentry background, assessing carpentry, but
and it seems to me like a lot of the, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but it does seem to me like a lot of the guys at Builders Academy are ex-builders, right? So they're all ex-builders?
Yeah, largely, I want to say. We're trying to, I think one of the biggest focuses that I mean, they're wanting it to be for carpenters by carpenters kind of thing. And I think just from conversations that I've had, it does make it easier to, it does make it easier to relate some of the information to people when you understand what they're doing. Like, I don't rely on anybody giving me any Bing words or anything like that. Like, if you call a skilly or a circulus or a skilly, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Technically, there are some terms that have to be, adhered to. But, yeah, it certainly makes it easier when it comes to having conversations.
Yeah.
And I think there's a trust factor as well. Maybe that
100%.
comes
They
onto
must respect you more as well as the trainer, that fact that you've done that, you've been there, done that, versus just like being a theory guy.
I think initially, yes. I think, kind of once you've been doing it for long enough, then that respect thing is there because they know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, at a first glance, when I introduce myself as Dane Simpson and I'm an ex-carpenter, I think it's a lot easier to get people on side straight away.
Yeah. And what do you say to people who say, is it sort of the scenario of those who can't do teach?
Hey, look, maybe. I'm not going to discount it.
I can just imagine the builder being like, yeah, those who can't do teach.
No, look, fortunately, I think a large part of being a builder is training, right? I mean,
Yeah.
our entire industry is training. So I've had 2 apprentices that I've worked with. One of them is now qualified. And he's got his own apprentices. So I've done a fair bit of training through my time, but you're possibly not wrong.
No, obviously there's playing. But so what? Tell me a little bit. What is your what's sort of the favorite part of you doing your job these days? Like what sort of the thing that sort of gets you excited to get up in the morning?
To be honest, it's the relationships. I mean, I love the qualification. I love the integrity of the qualification, but I like the relationships. I think that's the best part. And the one thing that we have with our more frequent site visits is that you get to see the minor changes in somebody's attitudes towards certain things. I mean, I've recently had a catch up with a guy where he just seemed a bit more lethargic on site, for example. And it's not normal. Like, normally he matches my energy level. He's excited about what he's doing. So, you kind of get through part of the site visit and you find out what's going on. And he stopped going to the gym. He's been, in his own words, a little bit lazy at home. He hasn't been coming to as many study nights. So straight away you can tell that things have changed personally, and that plays a big part of, how it all works everywhere else. So one of my goals for him was to go back to the gym. I mean, admittingly, the gym doesn't fix everything, don't get me wrong, but just getting back into that routine of what he was enjoying since he had an interest in it, and getting the positive endorphins from the exercise. Because
I interviewed Blair, who's also an educator, a couple of months ago, and it kind of seems like from what you're saying, for what he's saying, it is kind of a little bit more than just practical, logical, swinging a hammer. This is how you do it. There seems to be like that little a bit of a relationship building that you do with the apprentice, and you kind of you almost act a little bit like a mentor, a little bit almost, right?
Definitely, yeah. One of the things that we noticed since COVID was pastoral care. I don't know. I don't want to say pastoral care got more. That's bad English. Sorry. I don't think there's become more spotlight on pastoral care. I think we've just. I don't know. My words are not coming out of my mouth properly. But it's just it's more visible since COVID. I don't know if people's mental health has changed or certain things just, we've had more opportunity after not seeing people for a month, right? Because, I mean, we were doing our job over the phone to an extent. And then all of a sudden we actually got the opportunity to go back onto site, and you can see what that's done to people, how their mannerisms have changed, all those kinds of things. So pastoral care has definitely played a big part in what we've noticed, or at least what I've noticed since COVID. I almost want to say you tailor your delivery of your site visit more so to how the apprentice is doing.
Right, and it's sort of because they're humans and there's other elements to it.
Exactly, that's it. Somebody that I've worked with beforehand, he said being a trusted advisor as opposed to a transactional advisor. And that's kind of that's how I like to be.
So in terms of the structure, just remind me what does the structure look like for someone looking to get into an apprenticeship and get qualified? how do they go about it?
So ideally, an apprentice would find an employer first, generally. And then once they've got an employer, that employer would have enough scope of work to cover the trade or thereabouts. They would then get hold of us. We would come out, sign them up, and then, kick off site visits, study nights, and go from there.
And one thing I've always thought, like, in terms of specific skills that are important for an apprentice, you know, to start, you know, those early, say the first year or those early stages of their apprenticeship. Yeah. What are some, like, really important skills for them to kind of have or work on that you guys kind of look at?
To be honest, I think a big thing is punctuality.
Interesting.
It's something that's massive. I think just because it possibly leads to so many other avenues of people's mannerisms and attitudes, right? If you're punctual, then there's things that just follow suit. So being driven and motivated. I think just an eagerness to learn. You have so many different apprentices. I mean, I have apprentices that are eager to learn, but at the same time are scared to make mistakes, which, you know, kind of holds them back. Then you have others that are like a bull at a gate where they, you know, want to be using the nicest material. And you're like, pause. You're just doing this for me at the moment. Once you've, you know, got a bit more experience, then you can evolve into something else. But I would definitely say, just being eager and punctual. I think that's a big thing. Especially it's what the industry needs, to be honest.
And what are apprentices like out there at the moment? Like, what's the vibe? You know, we've heard a lot of feedback. Builders saying apprentices are freaking useless out there these days, and others are like, oh, they're lazy. And then you also have on the other side of the spectrum people being like, no, apprenticeships are awesome. Apprentices are awesome these days because they're open-minded. They're looking for ways to bring technology in and being innovative. Like, what's your sort of POV in terms of apprentices? You know,
I've seen both. In all honesty, I want to say largely the ones that are not prepared to put the hard work in don't last, in all honesty. So like Caleb upstairs, you could ask him to do anything. It didn't matter as an apprentice. If you wanted him to crawl under a house in his first year and go and put in thermal insulation in the mud and whatever, spiders and so on, he'd crawl under the house and he'd just go do it. It doesn't matter. And that's kind of what you're wanting almost. You just want somebody that's keen to just get stuck in and is motivated to get it done.
Yeah. The attitude seems to be the biggest thing, right?
Definitely. It's a challenge. Because building for your first job out of school is not like anything else. Like one of the things that I always say is you have to love being a builder, in all honesty. To work in 30-degree heat, to stand frames, stand trusses, or to work in freezing cold rain, putting cladding on or putting in windows. Like you really have to love being a builder to make it through. You can't just, there was always a stereotype that if you couldn't do anything, couldn't go to uni, you became a tradie, right? I honestly don't see how that stereotype ever survived because it takes a certain type of person to be a tradie.
Yeah, it's a lot harder.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So it's a lot harder. Like I went to uni, and I've been a hammer hand, you know, through on site, through holidays and stuff like that. It's way harder to work on a site, you know, like you say, than it is to go to university.
Yeah. Well, look, I think everyone has their challenges. I don't want to knock anyone at university, but there's certain things. I mean, for example, like Caleb, he was coming through to the study nights. So between 5 and 7 o'clock, fortnightly, whether it was in Te Awamutu or in Hamilton, he was coming through to the study nights to try and get through his theory stuff.
Yeah.
And working a full shift from 7:30 till 5. So, yes, you've got to be able to graft.
Yeah. Yeah, especially since you got to do the hard stuff during the day and you got to do the study at night.
That's it.
And beyond that, what do you reckon are the biggest sort of challenges apprentices have these days? Like in terms of, you know, what's sort of like the hardest part for them in terms of getting through their apprenticeship and getting qualified, do you think?
Again, there's a bunch of different things. I think one of the challenges is scope of work. So because the industry is so segmented, it's hard for people to actually see all aspects. And then even like COVID, for example, had a massive rush on everyone to work faster and get more done. So you kind of, as an apprentice, would get efficient at one part of a job, and then because everyone has to start the next one, you just stay doing the same thing and then just rinse and repeat over and over. So hopefully with the economy changing slightly and people having a bit more time, apprentices will have the opportunity to start a job and then take it all the way through completion to the end, to not only give them the satisfaction of seeing their hard work and labor, but also just to give them a more well-rounded understanding of how it all works. Because if you're not installing the doors, for example, you don't understand how important it is to straighten all your walls. And it's the same as, installing vanities and things like that. But as soon as you have to install a door and your wall's out of plumb, then you really learn how much of a pain in the arse it is.
So how long does it take for apprentices to kind of get that? Because contextually, you got to figure out where everything fits in, right?
So they talk about the penny dropping in the third year, to be honest. And that's where an apprentice kind of understands the mistakes they make at the bottom, how it affects everything at the top. Some apprentices obviously are different. Like I've had a guy that was a airplane pilot, so he flew for Qantas. And over COVID, he couldn't fly. So he became a building apprentice because he had time to do it. And for somebody like that, where you are so focused and your practices already are very meticulous with how you prepare, as you would have to be being a pilot, he was just on the ball. So you're really having to change your delivery based on who the person is, which I guess is one of the harder parts, just recognizing people's experiences and how it adds to their qualification.
Yeah, and there's like no, like in any career, any job, any path you go on, right? There's no like perfect or right type of way necessarily to do it. Like you're looking at a lot of these, builders that have come on this podcast. A lot of them are, let's say as a standard, they're all great at doing being a chippy. Yeah. But then some of them are more inclined to get off the tools and run the business, and they're great at communication and sales and talking to people, or maybe even the project management side, because they can get on the phone, and then you kind of lean more to the other guys, and they're just like, they can't think of anything worse than be on the phone all day. Like they want to be building something, they want to be putting up something, they get their satisfaction out of the building side, and so there's different personalities, right?
Definitely, yeah. And it takes all of them, right? Because some of them create more opportunities. I mean, you would argue that the guy that is running a business will end up having more foremen, so he'll be able to take on more apprentices. But at the same time, then you potentially have the chance of watered down training, whereas you have the other ones that have less apprentices and more one-on-one. So, it takes everyone. There was a statistic that was thrown around a little while ago, when I say a little while ago, a few years ago, which was something like 10% of qualified carpenters train 100% of apprentices.
Yes, and I've heard that stat as well, and that seems crazy. Yeah. And how do you see us changing that?
So I think that's largely what Builders Academy is doing, to be honest. So one of the things that people above me have decided that we're going to stay carpentry focused. So from my understanding, we currently have the carpentry level 4 qualification that we're doing. Next is the supervisor level 5, which has been released. We then have a small business skills qualification and quantity surveying qual coming out. And then next is, after that will be project manager. So I think our plan is to create a person that can start their apprenticeship and then stay with that employer to the point of where they can almost guarantee to be a successful business person by the end of it.
So they've gone through they've done that. They've gone through the site foreman training with you guys. They've gone through the project management training eventually, and then by the time they feel comfortable, by the time they feel like leaving, they have more of an idea of what it is to run a business.
Well, it kind of feels like guys at the moment flip a coin. Like you finish your apprenticeship, and most of the apprentices, I want to say it's 50-50. Most will do a year with that employer and then go out on their own. The other 50 will just leave straight away and start their own business. And then you're literally flipping a coin, I feel, whether or not you succeed. So our plan is to create more people that succeed. And then I think the other factor too is by having that career path for them to progress on, the employer also gets more value out of them. So I guess it works both ways, because the apprentice or trainee at that point will have more support to succeed from the employer.
I was thinking about this earlier. I was actually quite interested to ask you, what sort of, you look at apprentices that are, in more rural areas versus the city. Do you think there are different challenges for apprentices that are more in rural areas versus apprentices that are more in big cities like Auckland or Sydney? Or what are your thoughts on that?
There are challenges. I would say that the apprentices in the city have less opportunity. So the guys rurally, like I looked after a whole bunch of apprentices down in Taumaranui, and they were putting their own scaffolding up. They were installing all their own roofing iron. They were waterproofing bathrooms. They were tiling bathrooms. They did everything. So when you install your jib and the plasterer comes in and has a whinge at you because your screws are proud, they know all those kinds of things. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a bad example because you should still be checking your screws, whether you're in the city or anywhere. But in smaller towns, they do everything.
So they're a bit more well-rounded. So if you're a construction business owner in a big city and someone from a qualified guy from a rural area is applying for a job, you should probably consider that if you're looking for a well-rounded guy.
Definitely. I do think the downside is they potentially, just through necessity, don't have the efficiencies that somebody would have in a big city, just through repetition and speed that you have to work. So there's
pros and cons.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. But as I say, I'm spitballing. I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah.
So don't take it as verbatim if anybody comes to employ you.
And in terms of apprentices now versus like 10 years ago, do you see a difference in terms of like the mentality of an apprentice?
Yes, I do. Now, this is a hard one, largely because, if I look 10 years ago, obviously, I would have been, heavily in the industry at least. But I started with my dad. So with my dad being my employer for the first couple of years, a South African father, you do as you're told, right? I think the industry has gotten more PC and people have got a little softer. But I don't know.
It's such a fine line sometimes, because it's like, I almost see it as like how you raise your kids. I've got like 3 daughters and a son, and if you are soft on them, you're not really setting them up for success in the future. So that's very difficult. But at the same time, you can't just be hard, because then they just shut down and then it's really unhealthy as well. So there's definitely like a fine line. I just feel like the pendulum maybe
swung too far the other way. Well, it's interesting. Like I look at what carpenters have become, and as I was saying beforehand, when it comes to working in extreme heat, doing manual labor jobs, as an apprentice, I worked on a set of apartments, there were 8 apartments, and we stood frames all day. There were 4 of us standing frames, but you're lifting 6x2, 4x2 frames all day, middle of January, so it's reasonably warm, and you just have to keep going. Like
there's something about being like smashed 2:00, being like absolutely done, and then having just pushed through till 4 or 5 just to get it done.
Exactly, that's it, and that's kind of what I've seen has disappeared a little bit. And that's what worries me about the industry getting too soft as well, is that, I don't know, maybe that's a bad thing to say because people's bodies don't last that long. But at the same time, it's kind of what's needed to do a full day's work, right? So, it'll be interesting.
Be interesting to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, in 10 years' time, 12 years' time, once... the guys currently that are coming through their time are training apprentices. Does it get continually worse? Does the pendulum keep on swinging? Have we not seen it, go to its furthest point yet? I don't know.
Yeah. So let's talk about the business owner.
Yes.
So they have a role. You've got the apprentice. They've got to have the right attitude. They've got to come ready to work. They've got to come ready to push themselves and be open to learn. And but then you also got the other side of the coin, which is, and obviously you guys are in the middle, but the other side of the coin is the construction business owner.
Yeah.
What have you seen out there from them? Like, what makes a really good... what are some good characteristics of a construction business owner in terms of playing their role for apprentice to thrive and get qualified? in your opinion?
I think one of the biggest things is a team mentality, to be honest. There's no individuals, it's a team, everything's done together. One of the things that I've seen over the past few years, unfortunately, is cell phones. So, for example, when I first started my apprenticeship, all 5 of us used to grab our chairs at Smoko. The youngest or the freshest apprentice would get all the chairs out. We'd all sit in a circle. We'd all talk shit for half an hour as a team.
Eating your tuna.
That's it, yeah. And then we'd get up and we'd go back to work and we'd do the same thing, come back and so on. That has disappeared. So for some reason, I want to say, the companies that are more successful have people that work together and eat together and talk shit together. Whereas the ones where everyone disappears and goes and sits in the van and plays on their phone, it doesn't come across as a successful environment to me. So one of the things, for example, like Sentinel Homes, which you'll chat to Caleb earlier. I went to go do a site visit with them the other day. I was chatting to them there were 3 of them on site, so we had to catch up. I was probably there for about 2.5 odd hours in the rain talking to them, but they had to have set out done by 11:30 so that they could go to a team boxing thing. So they all, I don't know how often, but that Wednesday at 11:30, they all go boxing. So
cool.
they do things together all the time as a team. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is just everyone feels included.
Yeah.
And then obviously from there, if you're an employer with apprentices, just through necessity, you must be good at your job to an extent, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like your business doesn't grow if you're a bad builder, to be honest. By doing that, you'll have apprentices, and then we'll be there to help support them to train their apprentices, to help give them feedback and direction and things like that.
And so what are there any sort of other more sort of practical things that you've seen some of them do to kind of really kind of support the apprentice, like whether it's communicating maybe with the apprentice sort of what's coming up next in the build so they can study accordingly, like those sort of things?
Definitely, but that's a tough one because it also depends on how far through an apprentice is. Like in an apprentice's first year, to be honest, that information, to an extent, depending on their eagerness, means nothing to them. But by their 3rd year, definitely, an employer having that conversation with an apprentice makes a massive difference so that they can plan and prepare.
Yeah.
And I think in the construction industry as a whole, communication could improve. We had over COVID, people were jumping employers for 50 cents of a pay rise. Where if you actually went up to your employer and said to him, hey, Brad, I would really like an extra $2 an hour. What do you need to see from me to get that? I tell you now, the majority of employers would go, okay, sweet. Here's $1. This is what I want to see you doing to get the next $1. Because then the employer knows that there's somebody that's keen to work, they're communicating, they want to be there, and they've got somebody that they can invest in. Whereas, as I say, after COVID, everyone was just throwing money around, and he would jump from here to there. It was just a shit show.
Yeah, let's call a spade a spade. It was definitely entitlement was high in the last few years before
100%.
Things turned.
Yeah.
I have a lot of obviously I talk to a lot of builders, with the podcast and through my other business. But I also have a lot of mates that are builders, and the amount of conversations we've had where someone's like, they show me texts, like it will be like a guy that's like freshly qualified or, whatever. And he'll be like, oh, hey, the text message would essentially be like, hey, it's been 3 months since we've had a pay review.
Yeah.
I think I'm due for a pay rise.
Yeah.
Can I get a pay rise?
Yeah.
And it's like you're not going about this the right way, and it really pisses the owner off,
Well, the other thing is what's changed over the last 3 months.
At least make your case.
Yeah, that's it. So 30 seconds before you get your certificate to 30 seconds after, nothing has changed other than the fact that you've got a bit of paper. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a very important bit of paper, but at the same time, nothing has changed. So as you say, communication, make your case.
Yeah.
And then also remember that they're your employer. They owe you nothing.
Yeah.
They've just trained you for the last 4 years. Don't get me wrong, you've put effort in, but they've trained you.
And so with that dynamic there, who's more entitled? Like with that dynamic there, like you've got like the apprentice, they've come in, they know nothing, they do their apprenticeship, they get trained by this company. whether it's through their boss or like the foremen or whoever they're working with, the team. And then they get qualified. In your opinion, what's the right thing to do? Do at that point where they get qualified, they get their piece of paper.
Yeah.
Are they now entitled to just move on, leave? Should they be, or is the boss, entitled to, like, who has the upper hand at that point, and what's the right thing to do from an apprentice point of view?
Look, it all depends on the relationship, right, between the employee and the apprentice. In a perfect world, I think sticking around for a year is the right thing to do. And I think it's multifaceted too. It's not just paying your dues back, but it's also in that year, I feel like I learned more being qualified than I did throughout my apprenticeship. Like, you have so much more opportunity to make mistakes that actually have financial, impacts on the company when you're a foreman. So to stay with somebody for a year at least, to learn where your pitfalls are, to learn where you can improve, to work with somebody that knows what you're capable of doing, yes, I would say to stay with somebody for at least a year. Now, there are companies that have had people stay with them for even longer than that, which is perfect, right?
Yeah.
It goes full circle. And then there are other companies where people leave straight away.
Yeah, and I guess if you hate your boss's guts and it's a terrible environment, well, if you want to leave. But like you say, in most cases, if it's a great company, if you like the people, like, there's a lot of benefit in staying there with the people, your boss or your foreman, whatever. Now you've built rapport over like a 3 or 4 year period, 5 year period. That's great now, because now you already know that guy. He knows you work hard. You can ask, hey, do you mind showing me when you have time how you do your pricing, or how do you do your project management on these type of projects, or hey, like those sort of aspects where you can really suck a lot of information, business related information from your boss, so that when you do go out on your own, you actually have some more knowledge.
That's it. So that's the hope with the qualifications that we have coming up. That people can make use of those opportunities.
So within the industry as well, like what do you think are some misconceptions? And you'd know because you deal with them first year. What are some misconceptions apprentices have before sort of entering the apprenticeship? Or
look, I think the most important thing, depending on the size of the company, is believe that you're the best on the broom for your first year. In all honesty, like, the thing that I always used to tell myself is I'm just a piece of shit apprentice, right? Like, if you go in believing that you are the bottom of the food chain, I feel like it's so much easier to get through the hard parts to know that you progress.
Yeah, you're like lower than snake shit, as I used to say.
Almost, yeah. But if you go in there and like you feel like you're entitled, it doesn't work. Like, I mean, I've taken nail guns off people, and when I was training, you're not using your nail gun anymore. You're now using a hammer and a nail. You're going to learn how to hit nails in properly before you just start skew nailing everything and making a mess of it. So,
I had one guy in here who was telling me a story of how, like, he's like, a guy called him up, be like, hey, we've run out of like nails or like gas canister or whatever on the nail gun, right? I'm not a builder, so probably using the wrong terminology.
You're right.
But and he's like, oh, I've run out. Like, what do I do? And the guy would be like, you see that little hammer hanging there?
yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Pick it up and just
Start
nail
swinging.
it. Start swinging, mate. And it's just funny when you just sort of like miss the point.
So that's one of the biggest things, I think. It's just being able to graft.
And obviously success leaves clues. In your opinion, you've seen guys getting qualified and all that. What makes a good builder, in your opinion, if you had to nail it down to one or two attributes?
It's definitely the start. So one of the things that I always tell my guys is to stay quality focused, right? It's a lot easier to focus on quality and build speed through repetition than it is to start with speed and then focus on quality. So I feel like that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen with guys that become successful, is they're actually trying their hardest at the start to whatever they do, produce the best quality product. Whether it's something as simple as putting dynabolts into bottom plates, right? It's something small that you can see with the washers. Like, I'm obviously slightly OCD, but making sure that the washer is parallel to the edge of the timber, right? Those small things, just lead into better practices further on the line. I mean, obviously, I'm probably, way off with that one, but it's just something that I feel, is more important than anything, really.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. A little bit of OCD, like that. How you do one thing is how you do everything, right?
Yep.
And if you just from the start get used to those little things, it's just like it's just right.
Yep.
It's just going to show up in everything, and then eventually, when you're building an entire house and you have a team underneath you, it's going to go through them as well. So no, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, your tolerances are a big thing. And I mean, tolerances are what you learn through repetition too, right? Just through experience, like what you can lose, how much time you need to be spending to actually make certain things perfect versus, 1 or 2 mil that you're never going to see. So, and it being quality focused makes it easier to get that.
100%. Okay, so you've obviously transitioned. You used to work for the other guys,
yes.
And they're sort of the incumbent, and then you've moved over to Builders Academy. From your point of view, sort of how is Builders Academy different, and how are you guys like improving the industry from within that little sandpit you guys play in?
So largely, I want to say it's our visit cycle. So I mean, we're doing 6 weekly visits. So at the moment, the guys are coming up on their 8th visit since jumping over in September last year. And the one thing that I've noticed with that is bite-sized progression. Beforehand, you had 3 visits a year or 4 visits a year. So to make the same amount of progress, there's a lot more theory work and just information that people are supposed to digest and retain to explain to you. Whereas with visits every 6 weeks, it's a singular goal, one focus, work on it, come through to our study nights. So in the Waikato, we're doing study nights every 2 weeks.
That's cool.
For 2 hours. So guys come through between 5 and 7, guys and girls, I should say. We put on pizzas for them. And then, we're there to support them, to help them learn, to do assessment, like knowledge assessment. Obviously, the theory side of things gets, heavily related to the work that they're doing on site. But there's just more opportunities to take bite-sized bits of progress.
That's pretty cool. So, study nights. So, do other education providers do that as well?
As far as I'm aware, no. I think there's some independent little clusters of study nights being done, but not as a broad statement that the entire company needs to do.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there are other places like ITAB, which is a Polytech-driven assessment model. They do all of their stuff on block courses. But for us, I think our employers, from my understanding, don't enjoy losing people for weeks on end. Like, you kind of take on X amount of work under the basis that you've got people to be on site. Sending them to a block course is not necessarily ideal. So there are things that we're doing, however, I should say. So, for example, our team is starting to put together like a set out. Well, some of the other teams have done set out days where one day in a year they got a whole bunch of people around to help work through set out, which was basically an aspect of work where people don't get that much experience. So we putting something together in the Waikato on a Saturday to try and help get some of that experience. And then, everyone's doing different things. There's walkthroughs with MITRE 10, I think it was, or ITM, to kind of go through different types of materials. One of our team members down in Napier, they've just done a roofing industries walkthrough to show kind of different types of roofing materials, installation practices, different types of spouting, all that kind of stuff, just to try and help fill the holes, right? Where industry kind of, has just become too segmented. Yeah.
And we talked a little bit off air earlier as well around just after COVID in New Zealand, and excuse the Australian listeners, this is sort of New Zealand specific, but we had like thousands of people come into the apprenticeship program through different companies after COVID. You said something like 3,000 or 4,000 apprenticeships starting.
Yeah. It was a ridiculous number that we grew. I wouldn't want to stake my qualification on it, but it was something, 3,000 to 4,000 odd apprentices, I believe, that we took on basically across New Zealand.
Yeah, and so with the the other incumbent education provider, apprenticeship education provider, it is hard to kind of keep that quality, right? In terms of if there's so many apprentices coming through, keeping that sort of hands-on quality and service. And I guess that's probably one of the parts where Builders Academy has come in, and you guys are very much like, would you say that where you're at the moment is kind of you a bit more boutique, bit more relationship focused?
Definitely, yeah. Well, we're way more condensed. So at the other provider,
Everyone at BTICO, everyone know who they are, but
So I got up to 10 qualifications that I was assessing, with my highest numbers being 152, thereabouts.
Right.
And I was traveling between Taumaranui, so National Park probably, so 2 hours south of the Waikato, and I would have gone as far as Puki for a visit. So yeah, you're pretty stretched, even when it comes to doing assessment on various things.
Yeah.
Whereas with Builders Academy, it's just carpentry, which is my background. So yeah, it's a lot easier to be, to just provide a better service, in my opinion.
And can you kind of talk to me around maybe like a success story, or we could talk about Caleb, who's with us just on the other side of the camera there, or has there been sort of some examples you can share for me, some success stories around people coming through Builders Academy and how the experience may have been a bit different compared to when they were with the other guys? BCITO, I should say. I said it the wrong way.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. So, look, largely, I think we are able to just support people more, right? So, we've only been doing this for a year. So to actually say that Builders Academy is making, hands over different, I don't know. I know that I've got more buy-in from my guys. I feel like the relationships I'm building are better. I'm able to see more of the smaller changes in their mannerisms when it comes to how things are going, which helps me to guide their performance and things like that. So look, there's no one specific that I can put a finger on, but since we started, I've completed probably 10 apprentices or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So, sorry, there's no specific success story. I think everyone's a success, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just getting through their time is a success.
Yeah. No, that's good. I just think there's, with you guys, and you haven't been around that long, but, there's not that much staff turnover, which I know happens a lot, with the other guys.
Yeah.
And that continuity of training and continuity of care, or whatever you want to call it, is really important, right? Do you want to talk a bit about that, how important that is, having the same trainer from beginning to end versus just new guys coming in?
It makes a massive difference. And obviously Caleb will probably shed some light on that as well, because he started with me. I was his training advisor at BCITO, and then obviously jumping over, they didn't follow suit. I wasn't their training advisor for a while, but they came over to Builders Academy, and I've managed to complete him. I think it plays a massive part, because you get to know how somebody builds. You not only see what they do, but you remember what they do. Like, in all honesty, I can think about one of the first jobs that I ever saw Caleb at, which was a house with precast concrete panels. There was a pool out the front, massive mono pitch. I signed Tristan up there. Caleb was there. I can still remember things that we talked about. So for me, largely, it makes my job now, if I had to do a site visit with him, so much easier, because I actually know what he's done beforehand. You don't have to, go into as much detail for certain things, because I've seen him do the work, if that makes sense. So that continuity not only makes my life easier, makes his life easier, makes his employer's life easier. Obviously, you still have to do your job when it comes to verifying evidence and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it certainly is much easier. And then you have the other factor too, where to actually train a workplace apprenticeship educator or a training advisor, it takes 2 years for somebody to get, fully equipped and be able to actually seamlessly go out and do the job. So yeah, having somebody that's consistent makes life a lot easier on both parties, really.
Yeah, for sure. And any sort of like, and we're almost coming to an end because, time flies when you're having a good conversation, and having fun. What sort of final piece of advice, I guess, do you have for someone looking to get into an apprenticeship, sort of eyeing it up? Any sort of last piece of advice you would give to them looking to get into the industry?
Look, building is only the beginning, right? As you mentioned beforehand, I think having tunnel vision about just being a builder is, yes, of course, you can be a builder and work for somebody for the rest of your life if you want to. But at the same time, there are so many other avenues that you can go down, whether it is joining me at Builders Academy once you're qualified and you got some experience, or becoming an employer and a project manager. One of our guys, Roger, he built... Oh man, he's shown me some photos of aquariums that he built in Dubai and all sorts of crazy places. So you can go anywhere as a New Zealand builder, and the world loves us.
Yeah.
So literally the world is your oyster, to quote a very common phrase. I would just say get stuck in. Don't be scared.
Yeah.
We don't bite. No one's yes, you have to work hard, but you get a tan, maybe some skin cancer, depending on how you use your sunblock. But it's a great trade, and I honestly love it.
Yeah, no, that's good. You've had a few builders on here as well who's done the old European. They go to England, London, and or somewhere around England,
Canada.
Canada, to incorporate that as part of your OE is also a great thing to do. If you don't want to just save up a bunch of money and go traveling, you can make building part of it. And you travel around Europe or,
That's it.
America, whatever. So I've got some rapid fire questions for you and then I'll let you go.
Yes,
but thanks so much for coming on.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
This has been great. So what is your favorite tool?
To be honest, I wouldn't say I have a specific favorite tool, but I do love a hammer.
Yeah. You gotta love a hammer, eh? Worst on-site injury you've seen? It's getting graphic here.
Okay, so I have seen a guy take a 90mm nail to the eye.
Oof.
So literally straight through the tear duct. The D head and about 5 to 6 mil of the nail sticking out. So that was the worst.
Wow, so it went deep.
Yeah. So that was just supporting a joist underneath it. Somebody else was shooting the joist to another piece of framing from above it. Nail skewed out the bottom and caught him in the face.
Wow. So I assume he didn't finish the day off or anything?
No, he didn't. He went to hospital. Fortunately, there were no
long-term effects?
There was nothing.
Oh,
It
wow.
missed everything, so he was perfectly fine after they pulled the nail out. But yes, that is...
Great story.
That's the worst I've seen. I've shot myself,
Yeah.
which I think is almost a rite of passage, I want to say.
Yeah.
But that's about it, really.
Wow. What's the most common mistake new apprentices make?
Not having a diary.
Right. So not writing things down.
In all honesty, not having a diary. I think having a diary from the start is probably one of the best practices you could get into as an apprentice, just because it's something that transcends your apprenticeship, right? I was an apprentice that didn't have a diary, and as soon as you become a foreman, you have to have a diary. So just if you had a diary from the start to log your hours, to log what the weather was like, to write down what you did for the day, it makes your life infinitely easier. If your boss ever crawled up you about not getting something done on a certain week, or why did we take so much longer, you could flick into your diary. We had rain for 3 days. This is why I didn't. Or, just obviously that's a severe example.
It's a good habit to get into.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, it's good practice for everything.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. These days, apprentices are A, soft, B, open-minded, or C, hard workers.
Look, I'm going to talk about my own experiences and the ones that I have. So I'm going to say hard workers.
Okay.
Fortunately, I'm very lucky with the people that I've got.
Are you coffee guy or energy drink guy?
Ooh, it depends. So I did my time as a foreman. I would say that I never finished a warm coffee. So I progressed to an energy drink guy. Now in my later years, my weight is obviously a big factor since I spend a lot of time sitting down typing reports. So I'm now just a coffee guy.
Back to the coffee. EV or petrol head?
Petrol. I got a 77 V8 Camaro at home.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's
yeah.
it.
That's not EV, I assume.
No, not at all.
Rock or hip hop?
Neither.
What-
Drum and bass.
Drum and bass.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'm a DMB head. I mean, we listened to the rock like my entire apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So Fridays was like a you choose Fat 40. Everyone, had a little bit of time to plug their USB stick in or their phone and listen to some music. But nah, drum and bass all day, every day.
Nice. Okay. Probably speed up the workday.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
What's your most used emoji? That one, the Italian.
fingers, yeah,
that's a
that's
good one. Not used enough, I don't think.
No, I think so. He's it's
Yeah.
undervalued.
Are you extrovert or introvert?
Ooh. Now, it depends on who you talk to. If you ask my wife, she'll say I'm an extrovert because I'm currently sitting on a couch on a podcast, right? But for me personally, I enjoy my own time.
Yeah.
So I think, I spent enough time out on site in the sun that I just enjoy relaxing at home.
Cool. Rugby union or league?
Oh, stop it. There's only one choice. Boca!
Yeah, and obviously Springboks
Yes, sir.
over the ABs.
Yep.
UFC or F1?
UFC. The Duplessis all day, baby.
Wine or beer?
Oh, look, got to be beer. Corona.
Yeah.
I mean, weasel piss.
Yeah.
Right?
Makita, DeWalt or Milwaukee?
Makita. Now, I will say, let me premise this. Makita because that's what I started with. If I had to start now building again, I would I would have to toss up between Milwaukee or DeWalt,
Right.
right? But because I started my apprenticeship with Makita, I built batteries. You buy skins afterwards.
Yeah.
Makita.
Once you get your setup, then that's it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate
Really
that,
appreciate
Dane. And did you have fun?
Yeah, it was wicked. Yeah.
Yeah. No, awesome.
Candor was
Thanks.
brilliant. It was
Thanks for having you for coming on. And I think a lot of guys would have got a lot of information from that, which I think would be very helpful. So cheers.
Hopefully. Yeah, thank you. No
Thank
problem.
you.